Hello and welcome to In-House Insights. Now, Chris, today we are doing a wrap-up of Mumbrella360. But before we get in, I just want to identify the fact that I have dressed as the Cookie Monster today for some reason. But I think it's subconscious because I was listening to a great podcast about like the origins of Sesame Street and how it was all like these teachers who were like, we need to reach underprivileged kids, and it was like free to wear and it was all about learning. And I was like, it was really inspiring. So maybe that seeped in and now I look like the Cookie Monster.
Oh, there you go. I wouldn't have said Cookie Monster, Abby, but there you go. You've self-identified. The Sesame Street story is such a good one. I grew up watching Sesame Street, and there's a really good documentary on Jim Henson. I think it's on Netflix, but it's pretty awesome. He's obviously a real creative genius and a wonderful, wonderful man. So there you go. Get on that one if you can.
It's definitely a more interesting topic to dive into than I thought. And now, other fair warning for today, there is a person in my driveway looking at a retaining wall, which has sent the dogs kind of insane. So if they bark, apologies in advance. But I don't know about you, Chris. I am feverishly packing to get off to the States because we're off to do the big conferences in the States.
I know. I'm feeling woefully unpacked at this point. I took a bag down from the garage the other day, so it's sitting on my bedroom floor completely empty. So I haven't even started, but I'm looking forward to it.
It's very exciting. And this normally comes out on Tuesday, but so by then we will be just about to take the stage in New York to talk about global creativity at scale. Yeah. And then you're getting up to talk about In-House Agency of the Year, Treasury Splash. About
how good.
Journey.
Flying the flag for APAC over in the States. It's exciting, huh?
I have got so many jokes up my sleeve about like, if you need subtitles for the accents, let us know. But that's mostly directed at me. Americans tend to not be able to understand me, but I'll do my best.
You just have to roll your R's.
Roll my R's.
Yeah.
You're American in your history and your heritage, so you'll be fine. You'll start twanging up into an American accent straight away.
Yeah.
Well, it's going to be fun, and I think before we dive into overseas conferences, let's look homegrown. And one of the brilliant ones we went to recently as an industry partner was Mumbrella360. And I think for me, there's so many great conferences throughout the year, but this one always hits home with like really relevant topics. And I just like, and it's like kind of all of our people are there. It's a real, I don't know, hang out with your buddies and talk about the stuff that's really relevant. So it's super fun to go to. I love getting out there and repping iHack and in-house teams because they've traditionally not got on the stage that much. So it's really nice to just be out there in the thick of it representing. But yeah, I think it was I had some great sessions that I went to.
I always enjoy Mumbrella360. I think I've been 5 or 6 times, and it's one of the great marketing conferences in the Australian landscape. They do a good job. It always feels slick and well organized and well put together, and the content's usually good, and it's usually pretty rich and provocative content, I find. You know, they're doing a good job of making sure it's not just bland panels and whatnot. So yeah, there was some pretty good takeaways this year, and it's nice to connect with a bunch of our members and partners and friends from the industry.
Yeah, and I would always say if you are planning on going next year, sign up for the speed networking the night before, especially if you're going as a single Pringle, because it just by the end of that evening of like four I don't know, maybe 3 hours of like 10-minute meetings with a bunch of people, you then have a crew that you can say hi to and hang out with and have lunch and go to sessions with. But more than that, you get 10 minutes, you can get a lot of conversating done if you're intentional about it. And so I would recommend going to those. They're always fun.
Absolutely. I agree. Well, what did you take away, Abby?
Ooh, my first one that I love, it's my favorite one, is it's the what are keeping CMOs up at night. And it sounds like quite a doom and gloom topic, but it always really resonates with the audience. And, you know, this year they had Baker's Delight and they had IKEA, and there was just also Grant Thornton and then Swarovski Crystal as well. So it was just a really interesting panel, like really broad, and it wasn't IKEA, it was the iconic. Got my K's mixed up, or my C's and my K's. But yeah, and I just like Joanna Robinson always talks such sense, and I just I
she's
love
impressive,
listening to her talk. And you know, she gave a bit of a shout out for the speed and agility of in-house teams, which was always nice. I was like, whoop whoop. But it really is a nice opportunity for CMOs to talk about what is keeping them up at night, and it predominantly was AI and how they're gonna help their teams manage this change. And I was like, we've talked a lot about the positivity of AI and the opportunities and then the real grim stuff, but there's this middle ground of like, it's an opportunity, but what is keeping me up is actually just how to get my people involved. So it was a really
Mm.
interesting session, and it was just nice to see some of the the like camaraderie between CMOs, because I think as an industry we have to be better at recognizing that's a hard role, man. You don't have a lot of time to make a difference, to make a change, to leave your mark. Sometimes it can be quite a swift moving role, and it was just really nice to see the camaraderie come out of it. So yeah, I
Yeah.
enjoy that one.
I picked that session up as well, and I thought you're right. It was great, and obviously, these are big senior leaders in important businesses, and they're all feeling the same kind of pressures. And one of the things that came up, I think, reasonably consistently throughout the conference was, the CMO. This is not a new fact, but the CMO is often the shortest tenured of the C-suite, and there's a big push there's a trend towards short-term tactics being prioritized over long-term tactics. And that's got something to do with the fact that CMOs need to feel the need to get in the seat and make an impact immediately, as opposed to take the time to set the strategy and the positioning and get it right and wait for that stuff to land in the market, which, unfortunately, if you're only in the seat for 2 years, you might be setting the direction and the strategy and getting it all set up right, and you're gone, whether you're promoted into another role or in another business, or hopefully not the other way, but you might not be there to see the results of your work. So there's something to balance there in those sort of senior marketing roles around the importance of making good long-term decisions that are good for the business, as opposed to everything being on these short-term quarterly reporting cycles and performance marketing type cycles. So that
It's
was a big
almost
one.
a move to that old adage of like plant trees under which the shade you'll never sit, like, a
Yeah.
build for the future. But and I think I was like, I just saw that in the CMOs on the stage, that it was just kind of like, hey, if we could all do that for each other, even if the short tenure doesn't change, we're building for each other. And I was like,
Yeah.
that's I mean, they're CMOs competing for roles, but ultimately there's no one that can understand it better than each other. So I thought that was
Yeah.
quite a nice feeling. What was
Yeah.
your best session, or one of your best sessions?
I went to a few sessions that I thought were really good. And, um, one that really stuck with me, because they did a bit of a stunty move here, and Adam Ferrier is at the middle of it. He's a very clever thinker in the industry, and he made sure that everyone kind of remembered the session he was in. But we went into a session, and he started by talking about AI. I mean, listen, AI was in every single conversation. It always is. It's a bit of a central theme. But he asked everybody in the room to think of a ballerina in a pink tutu, and maybe to, if you could think of it in your mind, or maybe to generate it on your phone and in your preferred LLM or design tool, generative tool. And then he asked people to show it, and like, I think pretty naturally everybody came up with a little blonde girl in a pink tutu doing some sort of ballerina pose. And the point was, the LLMs are just going off the averages, which we've all heard, that sort of blandification of marketing that's coming through because everything's sort of a race to the middle. And he started landing this point, which is, not it's not an unheard of point, that if you rely on AI to do this type of work, you're just going to get mid-level or middling kind of insights and middling kind of results. But then what he did was really interesting, was he brought up on stage a guy named Paul Nunari, who's the CEO of a business called Inclusively Made. And Paul is differently abled. He came up in a wheelchair, and they actually dragged, I think, 30 odd people out of a different session. So they kind of grabbed a whole nother session, which was all about, I think, inclusivity in marketing and diversity in marketing, and how brands can represent different points of view and physical abilities and all the sort of different, the shades of the rainbow, if you will, in their marketing. And the point that they kind of made was, you guys have all come into this room to watch Adam, who's a thought leader in the marketing space, talk about whatever he was supposed to talk about. And then there was maybe 200 people in that room. And then in another room, in a different session, there was only 25 or 30 people in this session talking about inclusivity and diversity and representation in marketing. And so Paul's point of view was, I'm tired of talking to the same people over and over again. You know, when I do a session, only 30 people come to it, and yet 200 people are going to come to this session to hear Adam talk. So let's collapse those two conversations. And they've got together and launched an AI platform called Inclusively Made AI.ai, which is, from what I could understand, an AI platform that's supposed to help you when you're concepting or coming up with new creative ideas and developing campaigns. Make sure that they are inclusive, and make sure that it's not a little blonde girl in a tutu. Maybe it's, somebody of a different ethnic background, or maybe it's a boy, or, there's all kinds of different ways that could be represented. And it's I think an AI platform that's supposed to help marketeers and creatives and advertising industry types represent all types in their advertising. So I thought, the concept was great. It really landed with me. And just the idea of, like, only these 30 people went to that session, but we're going to bring them in here. And now we're going to have a conversation with a much bigger audience and a much bigger group around that. I thought it was really clever, and landed with me. So that was one of my highlights. There's a few more, but that was one of them for sure.
Yeah, I missed that session because I had a phone call to get to, which is much the bane of everybody's existence when they go to these these conferences. But I'm like, I heard a buzz, an actual visible buzz when I came back, and I was just like, everybody talked about it, and I was like, it is interesting. We've been talking about inclusivity and diversity and all these sorts of things, and yet we do, like, we're storytellers, and why aren't we trying to tell the story about that and how we can do that better, differently to our audience? I mean, that's great. I love that they did a bit of a stunt, and it made people probably pause and think and go, yeah, maybe I should have been a bit more interested in that topic. Or maybe that topic doesn't need to be a standalone topic all the time. It can be enfolded into everything that we do, because it is an everything problem. And I know that, like, the Dylan Alcott Foundation is doing some great work with the Shift 20 initiative, and then this is coming through, and it's just like, but I love the take on it, that it's like, hey, we're not necessarily, we are trying to change human behavior, but the human behavior we want to change is just try and use AI in a way that it thinks diverse in a way. And I love that. That's really fascinating. And I was quite sad to miss that session because it had a buzz about it for sure.
Yeah, it was good. What about you? What's the next one?
So my next one was, I mean, like, I don't know if this is selfishly, but I love operational and things like that's really around operationalizing new stuff. And so I went to The Future of Marketing is Here, which, as a title, it was like, oh no, is this the latest new way of doing, marketing, which I know what you always laugh at. But this was not. It was really on the grounds, active ways that you can embed AI into your work. And it was Amy Dixon from Australia Post, Lauren Dalba from Optus, and Yasmina Pinto from AGL. And they were talking with BMX about how they had just said, we're going all in and we're doing this and we're bringing it into the streams that, like, the actually embedding it into their work streams. And it was really interesting because it was like, okay, AI testing needs to be done with. We need to look at enterprise workflows. And it was like, treating it as a siloed experiment is over. If you're a big enough company, this has to be embedding, because daily repeatable workflows are how you actually see, positive outcomes. And then it's like, how, from an in-house perspective, I'm like, yeah, we have such a clear space to play in that, but we just have to find the time. We have to find the time to do it. And then I was like, okay, I heard a counterpoint recently where it's like, you shouldn't be looking at enterprise because you'll never get it past legal. Make a siloed space to play. And then I was like, and they were talking about how, production is their siloed place to play. It sits outside all of their enterprise work streams. It sits outside all their enterprise data and all that sort of stuff, so that it's safer. It's this little walled garden. And I was like, I mean, then they're ostensibly saying the opposite from each other, but they're not really, because in-house agencies can be that place to move from AI testing to enterprise workflows. Treat it like a little enterprise that you can, your lawyers and your procurement people aren't going to get insane about, but you can really start to embed it. So it was a really interesting one for me. And I loved that all three of those people talked about how they had actively done it, and they showed us work, and it was just like, wow, they'd been quietly doing it. Like, it wasn't like I hadn't heard all of that. And they gave us some tips like re-architect your team structures, just talking about skills over headcount. It's not about, cutting heaps of heads, cutting heaps of heads. There will be changes to that, but it's more about how do you find the right skills, and how do you like redesign job roles and job descriptions, not just, you know. And then it was like, there's high stake brand safety and there's trust guardrails you have to look at, but it's like, IHAs are the ultimate guardians of the parent company's brand. So it's like they're uniquely positioned to build and enforce these safe AI frameworks because they because they are the guardians. So it was really interesting. And then I'm sure this one will fire you up, Chris, but it was like that convergence of media, operations, and creative. And it's like, Lauren was like, it's a big theme that you have to have all of those people at the table. And it's like, well, cool. That's what we're already doing. That's where we bridge that gap in-house natively. So we could just be such a force for good in this. But yeah, it was a really good session.
Yeah, it sounds it. And, again, another one focusing on the importance of implementing and adopting AI within your marketing function. Some of the stuff you were just talking about reminded me of the iHack AI report that we've just been in the sort of putting the finishing touches on this week. But a lot of the themes that you were talking about are very, very common across the industry. It's like that there's really high penetration, but not a lot of operational maturity through the AI tools. A lot of singular workflows, people using it for one task at a time. It's doing a bit of copywriting, it's doing a bit of design, maybe it's doing a bit of insights or trends analysis, but not a lot of stitching it together into integrated workflows or agentic type behavior where you're giving the tools the ability to go off and do work, and research and find things on their own. So that's the next phase, and businesses are all heading in that direction. It just takes a little bit of time.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. I just like so many AI talks. You come out of feeling a bit like, what am I going to do? That one I found out coming, going, that was interesting. That was really, on the ground case studies and very open and honest conversations about what to do. So it was great.
Yeah, good
What
one.
about you, Chris? Did you have one more?
I've got the other kind of highlight that first jumped to mind when you asked was Andrew Tyndall from System One. If you're a marketing fanboy like I am, you probably have followed him on LinkedIn. He's pretty ubiquitous on LinkedIn. He's a good commentator on the industry. Always talking about great advertising and creativity and the power of creativity on building brands and emotion in building brands. System One does testing in that space, so you'll forever see them sort of showing TVCs or ads and the emotional resonance scoring, and they've got a model that they use. So anyway, I think it was sponsored by Free TV Australia, which is the industry body for all the free-to-air TV networks. So there's a little bit of a vested interest in there in Andrew coming out and talking about how important TV is. But, as a former head of media, I'm a believer in, the reach and emotion grabbing sort of attention that you can get from big format TV, cinema, even radio and outdoor these days. So I'm still a believer in some of those traditional media channels. But he was funny. First of all, he was really funny. Like he was probably the most interesting and humorous presenter. And he talked a lot about how marketers have strayed from the core principles that make marketing work. And I think I touched on this a little bit earlier, but the move towards so much more sort of short-term performance marketing, digital tactics, as opposed to some of the longer-term brand building, emotion driving tactics and some of the bigger, higher reaching channels. So he spent, half an hour or so sort of kind of almost berating the audience a little bit with tongue in cheek. He was calling us all naughty marketers, which was quite funny every time he did that. But then he was talking about, some of those themes that you've heard most marketing scientists talk about in the last few years, talking about consistency, brand iconography, using emotion, being distinctive. He used the word showmanship
Mm.
coming up a lot, like earning attention. And then he told a real fun story about social media and trends. And, he was referencing, oh gosh, I'm going to forget it. He was referencing how brands seem to jump on the latest trend. What was that little baby hippopotamus? That was the one he was talking about. There was a little
Yeah.
baby hippo that popped up a few months ago, and everyone sort of within a day or two, everyone's popping up, jumping on that trend. But I think he called that a firework, where there's a little pop of attention, but it's quite unpredictable. And
Mm.
by the time you've jumped on it, you've kind of missed it already, unless you're really, really fast and really you get the creative right. But what he talked about was the best way to harness attention through culture online is actually look for I think he called them bonfires, which is where it's more predictable, large scale attention. And, the reference in our market would be things like, the Ashes cricket or the State of
Mm.
Origin. And I think he even used the maths finale as an example. So when year on year, time in and time out, these are going to be big moments that a lot of people in the country and your audience are going to be talking about and listening to and watching. And that's a good opportunity to plan something to get involved in that conversation rather than feel like you've got to be reactive and do it, within 24 hours. So, I thought that was a pretty good takeaway. I've always been a big believer in you've got a plan to be reactive. And, there are
Mm.
big moments in the calendar for most brands that happen, and they happen the same time every year. Christmas is always the same time. Summer's always the same time. State of Origin, biggest AFL Grand Final. There are the biggest media moments in Australia. The Australian Open tennis final. Those are big moments, but they always happen at the same time. And if you want to get involved, you can probably start planning it a year out. So there was something clever about the way he was positioning that as well.
It's interesting. I would love to see him on stage with Daniel Pankraz, who was in one of the earliest sessions, because he was just absolutely going off on performative marketing. Like he was like, we have this dangerous habit of pumping out endless content, activations, partnerships, just to signal effort to internal stakeholders, but while hollowing out the actual brand. And he was like 78% of Australian consumers wouldn't care if most brands disappeared tomorrow. And I was like, oh wow, way to hit everybody where it hurts. But I was like, it was a real funny one because I was thinking in-house agencies are really uniquely vulnerable to this because we sit right next to internal stakeholders and there's this constant pressure to execute visible activity just to like satisfy, I don't know, tick boxes. And he was like talking about doing, like there was a chat about in order to combat the bloat of this, you could do a stop doing audit, being like, okay, would this project exist if it couldn't be instantly measured? Who inside the company who
Mm-hmm.
is this piece of content actually for? And like, is it like, let's tie this back to our marketing KPIs. Like, what are we trying to achieve? And is this just work for work's sake? Because we constantly see people being like, oh, we're trying to do more with less. And it's like, yeah, but is the more necessary? Like, what have you sat down and said what's working, what's not, what actually ties into our KPIs? And I think that's something that in-house agencies should be looking at, being better at. Get that data, find out what's performing, come to the table with strategic knowledge about what moves the business needle, because
Mm.
that's crucial. It's just crucial, and you're there. So I thought like a cool thing would be like a stop doing audit, because so much of the time it's like, because someone's the loudest voice and they think it's a cool idea, and it's like, oh, okay, but let's prove it. Or like,
Yep.
and I'm not saying prove everything, because sometimes the crazy stuff is where the cool stuff happens and you've got no way to prove it, but at least for a lot of it, what are we doing and why are we doing it?
They say strategy is about making choices, and choices about what not to do. You're not, if you choose to do everything, you have no strategy. You're just doing everything. Strategy is about being really clear and focused, because, and I spend my life going into businesses and marketing teams and looking at what they're doing and kind of helping them refine and optimize. And they're almost all doing too much. They're almost all
Mm,
trying to do too many things, and it's too many priorities and too many stakeholders. And somebody's got to make a call at some point and go, hang on, stop. The,
yeah.
the business will be it would be more beneficial to the business if we can focus our resources and energies against the two things that are working the best instead of the 19 things that are all kind of working a little bit.
Isn't
So
Isn't that a
that's a
great piece of
hard
advice
thing to
for
do.
all of us, Chris?
Yep. Yep.
I
We
think everyone
probably
can take that into your own jobs and our own
absolutely.
what we're trying to do.
Yep.
And on that note, I will wrap up the session because I've got a pack, and you know, no, we've got a lot to do before we get on the road. But I think it's just been great. I love going to these sessions, and I had a couple of people message me and say I'd love to hear the iHacks outtakes from it. So here you go. We've done it in video podcast format for you. But yeah, we will keep being out there and representing the in-house peeps at these events, because it is really important to know that we have a seat at the table and we're keeping on top of the trends.
Yeah, I think it'd be great to see more in-house people getting along to these things. You know, that's one of the things that we try to do at iHack is bring the outside in. I think you can go in-house, and all the benefits that come with that, the proximity and the closeness and the knowledge and the data and all that stuff comes along, but you can lose a bit of connection with the outside world. And so that's a big part of what we try to do, and that's why we go along to these things. But for sure, leaders of in-house teams and leaders of creative and design and copy and strategy and media and all those things, they should be getting along to these events and getting exposure to what's going on out there in the big wide world as well.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Good one. Next time I see you, we'll be in New York.
Yeah, I know. Well, in person, I'm sure we've probably got at least 3 meetings between now and then, but in person, we'll be in New York City. And like, just for since the Knicks are, what do they call it? Tapping off? Like, tapping off?
playing hoopy jump.
Like when they kick off, I don't know, whatever the top ball hits thing.
Tip off.
Tip off. I was like, tap off is not right. I've been getting into it a lot because 2 of the people I'm closest to here are big Knicks fans. So hopefully it works out so that we're in town for the last game. And
oh man, that'll be fun. I didn't think about that. Is that game, game 5 or game 6 on next week?
We're there for game 6.
Oh man, that'll be amazing if we're in town for that. Oh, huge.
So
all right.
The viewing parties will be epic. But yeah,
totally.
So we will report back. So the next time you all on the podcast might see us is us all like in the Times Square cheering.
Yeah. All right.
So everyone, good. Be well, and I will catch up with you soon, Chris.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.